Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. So it's been a few days since the closing of the transfer window now, and I think we've all had a little bit of time to collect ourselves a little bit, emotionally recover from the stress of deadline day, and I think it's now time that we take a look back at Liverpool's transfer window, at the players that have come in, at the players that have gone out, at the players that I think should have come in, maybe the players that should have gone out as well, and assess how Liverpool did overall with regards to the transfer window. So today I'm going to be looking at all the players that Liverpool brought in, giving them a rating out of 10 based on like how well they've settled into the team, whether or not I think we got a good deal, and just in general how good of a footballer they are as well, and also looking at the players that I think Liverpool should have brought in that they didn't manage to get in this summer transfer window. So starting off, Liverpool actually got proceedings going fairly early when they brought in Solanke from Chelsea, and I think at the time there were quite a few people disappointed by this signing because it happened quite soon after the end of the season, but already Man City had done an awful lot of business. I think they brought in Bernardo Silva and Edison Moraes, and they brought them in for huge prices as well. And I think at the time it was simply a case of people looking at the business Liverpool had done, looking at the business Man City had done, said Man City had done better business than Liverpool, and just everyone's heads exploded on the spot and decided that that was the end of the world. And I think the issue is that Solanke was not a signal of how Liverpool's summer was going to go, but because he was the first signing, people took it as that, and I think at the time we didn't really know that much about Solanke. The deal came fairly out of the blue, so we didn't really have time to look up what kind of player he was beforehand or anything like that. And to be honest, none of us had really ever heard of him beforehand anyway. Obviously, he didn't break through the ranks really at Chelsea. He'd only played for England at youth level, and he had a loan spell at Vitesse Arnhem, which, I mean, none of us have really ever taken an interest in Vitesse Arnhem. So at the time, we were fairly confused as to why Liverpool had signed this player or what kind of player he was going to be. But over time, it has actually turned out that Solanke, I think, has been a very, very good signing for Liverpool. He had a very, very good pre-season. He seems to have hit the ground running incredibly well. He's a good finisher. He seems to fit Liverpool's system very well. He's a good centre-forward overall in terms of his overall play. He fits that kind of mould that Jurgen Klopp looks for in his centre-forward. And he's actually ended up usurping players like Divock Origi in the pecking order, because when Solanke first came in, one of the reasons that we weren't that excited was because it was said that he was actually expected to play mostly in the under-23s for most of this season instead of actually breaking into the first team. But after some incredible performances in pre-season, scoring a few goals, contributing very well to the overall play, he went above Divock Origi in the pecking order and is now very much a first-team prospect. And thanks to Solanke, I'm now weirdly looking forward to Liverpool's first League Cup game against Leicester away in a couple of weeks' time, because I think that's going to be our first opportunity really to hopefully see Solanke playing competitive first-team football for Liverpool and see how he gets on. So Solanke has actually turned out to be a very, very good signing now that we know what he's like. And given that, I mean, we don't know exactly what the fee is at the moment, it's still to be decided by a tribunal, but I can't imagine it will be more than 10 million. Most of the figures touted were around 3 to 5 million. So a very good deal for Liverpool, one for the future as well as being one for the present. And overall, I'd give the deal an 8 out of 10. I think that was good business from Liverpool. So it's Liverpool's next signing that really kicked things into gear, because going into the summer with Champions League football now on offer at Anfield, we were expecting big names coming in for big money, and the first time we saw that from Liverpool was when they brought in Mohamed Salah from Roma. And this, unlike Solanke, was a much more protracted out transfer saga. It took a long time for Liverpool to get this deal over the line, but looking back at it, I think that's actually quite a good thing, because there was a recently published study on BBC Sport. I don't know if many people have seen it, but basically what it did was it took this thing which predicted, based on things like performances last season and loads of other different gubbins, basically predicting how much a player was worth in the current transfer market. And basically, the biggest bargain of the whole summer was Mohamed Salah. When you look at the gap between how much a player was worth and how much a team actually spent for a player, I think Liverpool spent about 20 million less than they actually should have done for Mo Salah in terms of Mo Salah's actual valuation in the current transfer market. And I think that is part of the reason why negotiations took so long, because Liverpool were very careful to ensure that they got the best deal possible for Mohamed Salah. And looking back, I mean, it's an incredibly good piece of business from the club, because he's slotted into the squad perfectly. He recently won the club's Player of the Month for August. I mean, personally, it was Roberto Firmino for me, but overall, fans seem to have decided that Mohamed Salah is their Player of the Month for August. Like I said, he's slotted in seamlessly, and he adds an extra dimension to the Liverpool attack as well. I mean, last season, attack wasn't really the thing that we looked at and thought, that is the main problem, that needs to be fixed over the summer. But there were still some niggles with the way the team played, and I think the fact that Mo Salah, he brings some added pace, which complements Sadio Mane on the other side. He brings some extra width as well, and also a finishing touch which is quite uncommon in wingers at the moment in football. He creates a lot of chances and he scores a lot of chances as well, and that was something that was missing from Liverpool's attack. So taking all those things into account, I think it's a 9 out of 10 from me for the signing for Mo Salah. Why not a 10 out of 10? I think maybe just because he wasn't a completely necessary signing. It wasn't something that went into someone and thought, we need this. You know, we could have maybe waited a year to bring in a player like Mo Salah. It wasn't urgent. But given just how good he is and just how good a deal Liverpool got when bringing in Mo Salah, it is a 9 out of 10 from me. So after the signing of Mo Salah, things once again went pretty quiet for Liverpool in the transfer market. Everything seemed to be going on under the radar. It didn't seem like any signings were on the horizon. And then after about a month or so, Liverpool eventually brought in Andrew Robertson from Hull for a fairly decent fee of about £8 million. And this is another transfer like Dom Solanke that wasn't really met with much fanfare, because once again, we wanted to see big names, we wanted to see players coming in for big money, and Andrew Robertson coming in for £8 million simply isn't that. And I think that's one of the reasons that fans were disappointed. But since we have seen Andrew Robertson playing for Liverpool, he hasn't actually played that many games. Only one competitive one so far, which was a pretty good performance against Crystal Palace. And apart from that, only a handful of other friendly appearances as well. But he did play fairly well in those games. So I think in terms of being one for the future and one that I think will develop very well under Jurgen Klopp and could turn into a very good player for Liverpool, I think the Andrew Robertson deal was a very good one. But again, it's one where people have compared our business to Man City's, because left back, as we all know, was a big issue for Liverpool going into this transfer window. Unlike Mo Salah, we looked at the left back slot and we thought that is something that Liverpool desperately need to improve on. So we thought Liverpool need a left back, Monaco have a very good left back, Liverpool have lots of money, Monaco want a lot of money, and Liverpool and Monaco play very similar systems. So Benjamin Mendy was the name that everyone decided on and said, it's Mendy or bust. Liverpool should get this player, otherwise it's the end of the world. As it happened, Benjamin Mendy went to Man City, Liverpool didn't sign him, and we got Andrew Robertson in instead. And I think that is one of the reasons why fans sort of lost their heads about this transfer a little bit. And I can kind of see where they're coming from, in that Liverpool do need someone very good in that left back spot, and maybe Andrew Robertson, while he could turn into a very good player, isn't, say, an instant fix for it at the moment. But I think given that he has a lot of potential, I think Jurgen Klopp is certainly the right manager to develop him as a footballer. And I think looking at what he's got at the moment in terms of skills and talents and his playing style, I think he fits our system very well. So overall, given that it's also a very good deal, I think maybe it would have been a 7 out of 10 if we got him for normal Premier League money. But I think getting a left back that has played Premier League football for £8 million is a pretty good deal in today's market. So it is an 8 out of 10 for the Andrew Robertson deal for me. And after that, once again, Liverpool went very quiet in the transfer market, and it wasn't until the last few days of the window that suddenly they sprang into life again, and Michael Edwards, our Lord and Saviour, dropped the Naby Keita bomb on us. No one saw this coming. We knew that Liverpool had been chasing him all summer. We knew that they put in multiple bids, but the deal had looked dead for a very long time. And then all of a sudden it was announced that Liverpool had agreed a deal to sign the Guinean midfielder, who we now all basically know and love. We've all seen the YouTube videos, we've all seen the montages, we've all seen the articles from Bundesliga experts saying how he's like Gerrard and Kante and Lampard and Iniesta combined into one super midfielder. And I think that got us very, very excited for Naby Keita. So it was wonderful to see that Liverpool had secured the deal. Now, obviously, there was the caveat that the deal will not happen until next summer. Naby Keita will be an RB Leipzig player for this season. Liverpool only paid his release clause plus a premium, so he won't arrive until next summer. There is potentially a possibility that he could come in January. I think a lot of that depends on Leipzig's fortunes, and obviously Liverpool would have to pay an extra premium on top of that. Personally, I don't think that's very likely, and to be honest, I think we might actually be fine unless we have a huge injury crisis and we desperately need an extra midfielder. I think we can actually cope with leaving Naby Keita until next summer and then letting him have a proper full pre-season under Klopp so that he can hit the ground running. But all in all, Naby Keita is a fantastic transfer. It is one of those players that we really needed. I mean, again, like Mohamed Salah, it wasn't a position that desperately needed reinforcement. I think overall our midfield is pretty good. But Naby Keita would bring something extra, something that we don't have at the moment, and would also elevate the overall quality of the midfield significantly above what it is already. So all in all, a 9 out out of 10 transfer for me, and the only reason it isn't 10 out of 10 is the fact that we do have to wait that extra year for Naby Keita. And then Liverpool finally rounded off their transfer business for the summer with the signing of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain from Arsenal for somewhere between 35 and 40 million pounds. And this is one transfer where I don't really know how to assess it, because the thing is, I mean, we've seen Oxlade-Chamberlain play so far this season for Arsenal. I think we also took a very strong interest in how he played for England in the recent internationals, and to be honest, he hasn't really impressed. He hasn't really played that well. But then again, he's coming from an Arsenal team where that's the case for most of their players. Arsenal have got lots of very good players at the moment, and pretty much all of them are underperforming massively. So it's very hard to tell where Oxlade-Chamberlain is at really at the moment, and it's hard to tell what kind of player he will become for Liverpool. At the moment, I'm quite optimistic because I think there are very few players on the planet who Jurgen Klopp can't improve and who he can't take and elevate them to another level in terms of their footballing ability. So there's a lot of promise there. I think there's every chance that Oxlade-Chamberlain could become a very good player for Liverpool, but I don't think it'll be until about January of this year that we can really know, where he fits into our team, what kind of player he's going to be for Liverpool, and just how good he is as well. Because I think while obviously he's played at Arsenal, he's got experience in the Premier League and playing for a big club as well, so it shouldn't faze him too much coming to Liverpool. It will take him a fair bit of time to adapt to Jurgen Klopp's methods, bring himself up to speed fitness-wise as well for that style of football. So I think give him a few months, and then hopefully by January we'll know whether or not Oxlade-Chamberlain is a good piece of business. So for now, given that it was also a fairly large fee as well for a player who we don't necessarily know how he's going to turn out, I'm going to give Oxlade-Chamberlain a 7 out of 10. Like I said, I think this still could turn out to be a very good deal, but a hard one to assess just yet. So given the kind of high ratings that I've given to all the players that Liverpool have brought in over this summer transfer window, you'd think that fans would actually be pretty pleased with how things have gone, but that's just not the case, is it? I mean, after the deadline had closed, everyone, including me personally, was pretty disappointed. And I think a lot of that was because we were promised a manic deadline day. We were promised the best deadline ever with about £175 million war chest being spent, multiple players being brought in. It was meant to be incredible, and it ended up just being a damp squib, really. We didn't really sign anyone. We obviously announced Oxlade-Chamberlain, but we knew that was happening anyway. And all the players that we expected Liverpool to bring in didn't arrive, and I think that's why I've left a few days between then and when I'm making this video now to sit back and maybe assess the transfer window without the very negative feelings that I had towards it once the deadline had actually passed. One of the players that we did miss out on that was very disappointing to miss out on was Thomas Lemar, and I think it's a funny one in that I think if the Lemar saga had never happened, I think people would have actually been a lot happier with the transfer window than they were, because no one was really talking about Lemar. No one ever really said we needed a player like him or a player of his quality going into the end of the transfer window. But then suddenly it emerged that Liverpool were putting in bids for Lemar, that Liverpool were very serious about bringing in the player, that Jurgen Klopp really wanted him, and we all got carried away. We all watched YouTube videos and montages and read articles from French football experts this time talking about how good Thomas Lemar is, and we all had our hearts very set on the idea of him coming to Liverpool, and then the move didn't happen, and that was very disheartening for us. But I think given that we know Lemar wants to come to Liverpool, so much so to the point that he actually turned down a move to Arsenal, even though a fee had apparently been agreed between Monaco and Arsenal, I think this is a deal that could eventually happen at some point in the near future, whether that's January or whether that's next summer. Hopefully Liverpool can get this deal over the line at some point, and given that we don't really, like I said, we don't really need Thomas Lemar at the moment, he's not an urgent signing that Liverpool need to make, it's not necessarily the end of the world that we missed out on him this summer if there is a chance that we could come in for him in another window. But the obvious reason that everyone, including myself, was very disappointed with deadline day was the fact that Liverpool didn't sign Virgil van Dijk. And I mentioned earlier how Liverpool signed some good players in positions where they didn't necessarily need to improve. Centre-back is definitely a position where we need improvement. I think it's safe to say that Liverpool definitely needs someone who's more commanding, more comfortable on the ball, and just generally is a better defender than what we've currently got in terms of centre-backs. So the fact that we didn't sign Virgil van Dijk was very disappointing, but to be honest, I can forgive the club for this, because I think obviously we had a large amount of difficulty trying to sign Virgil van Dijk. Southampton were very stubborn. We had the whole thing about them reporting us to the FA and us having to issue a public apology and everything. It was very difficult for us to get the Van Dijk deal over the line, and Southampton simply would not budge in their stance to sell the player. And while there were a lot of people out there who said, well, why isn't there a plan B? Why have Liverpool not gone in for another centre-back when it's clear Van Dijk isn't going to happen, and they clearly need another centre-back and better defender in their ranks? But for me, it comes down to the idea of Van Dijk is the player that Jurgen Klopp wanted. For Jurgen Klopp, it was Van Dijk or bust. It was either get that player or move on with what we've got, try and get the best out of that and potentially come in for Van Dijk at another time. On a side note, I think we will go back for Van Dijk. It's still unclear over whether or not we will actually get him. You know, Southampton could stay very strong on their stance of not selling the player, but I think it's highly likely that Liverpool will at least go back in, continue their interest in Van Dijk and hopefully make a bid at some point for him. But again, I'm going to come back to comparing Liverpool to Man City when it comes down to looking at our transfer business. And I think Man City are an example of how just because your defence isn't bad doesn't mean that just signing extra defenders is going to solve the problem. And forgive me if I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but there's an English film critic called Mark Kermode who is not a big fan of Michael Bay. Michael Bay, as you all know, the director of the Transformers films, not very popular films among people who like good films. I think that's a controversial opinion maybe, but it's just what I think. They're just not good. But as Mark Kermode says, Michael Bay treats actors like special effects, in that for an explosion you say, right, we need an explosion here, can we get some special effects in? For bits where you need acting, he says, right, we need some acting here, can we get some actors in, bring in someone to do the acting for us? And Man City kind of applied that attitude to defending, in that they said, oh, we've got a defensive problem here, we're not defending very well, let's bring in some defenders, let's sign some people who are good at defending. And they've done that with Otamendi, Demichelis, Mangala, John Stones, a lot of players they've brought in who supposedly are good defenders, they've come in for good money, they've had good reputations, and things just haven't worked. It hasn't solved Man City's problems. We still look at them and think they've got issues defensively that they need to resolve. So there's a high chance if Liverpool had just said, we've got a defensive problem, we can't get Van Dijk, but let's just get someone else in. Let's get maybe Kalidou Koulibaly or Stefan de Vrij. There were lots of other players that we were apparently linked with in that centre-back position. If we just brought one of them in, it's highly likely that that would not have solved our problems and Liverpool still would have had a problem with how they defended. So I can understand why Liverpool have said, okay, we're not getting Van Dijk now. Let's focus on what we've got. Let's try and coach some defensive sensibility into them, because I think that is as important as personnel, the coaching side of defending. So hopefully that's going to get focused on from here on in, and Van Dijk will be revisited later. So all things considered, while like I said on deadline day I was very disappointed about the Van Dijk thing, I think we'd all got our hopes up. We'd all thought that maybe there was a chance of Liverpool getting the deal over the line. So it was disappointing to see that deal not happen. I think in the grand scheme of things, provided we improve our defensive play overall through coaching and maybe go back in for Van Dijk at some point, I'd say that Liverpool have done a fairly decent job overall with the players that they brought in this summer transfer window. So for me, looking at the players we brought in, overall, it's a 7 out of 10. Not amazing, not world-beating, but a pretty good window, all things considered. So that is all for today's video. I will be back with another video very soon about the players that Liverpool sold this summer and the players that maybe they should have also binned off that are still at the club. But until then, thank you very much for watching this video. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're new around here. Stick around for some of the pre-match content for the game against Man City. That'll be coming up over the next few days as well. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days. Follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter as well. And I'll see you in a bit. Bye for now.